You're listening to The Bounding Box, where we talk about web development, geo development, and everything in between. All right, welcome to The Bounding Box. We got a great show today. I have a great guest here, Christopher Moravec. Christopher, please tell us who you are, what you do, what's your problem?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me here. I'm Christopher. I'm the CTO for a small consulting company and custom software development company called Dymaptic. We build software and configure and extend the ArcGIS platform in all kinds of fun and fascinating ways for people. Um, the thing that I'm focused on and working on these days is how to bridge the AI gap and how to bring this into our workflows and make us more efficient with and keep us all going. It's this AI stuff is changing so fast. It's hard to keep up with what works and what doesn't, and what's a good idea and what's a bad one.
Yeah, exactly, right? There's been so much stuff going on from like people just getting started with the basic prompts and people learn how to like kind of hack the prompts a bit and get better detailed info, right? Uh,
Yeah, it's funny the number of prompt guides on the internet. Like, if you watch on LinkedIn, like every day there will be dozens of prompt guides that come out. And they're always fascinating to me because there's a lot of them that are like, here's my top 10 tips for Chat GPT. And each of these models do have their own quirks. So you can learn a lot from like looking at these prompt guides and seeing like what works to tell a different model what to do. For example, Claude, which is my favorite model for coding, is way more malleable in its tone than the other models are. And especially if you give it like XML tags and tell it how to take input within certain brackets or XML tags and provide output within those XML tags, it can do that very reliably. Whereas like OpenAI's ChatGPT models will forget. And so that's why it has, which is like, that's a funny thing to say, right? The AI model will forget. But but that's why OpenAI has like the structured output format that you can rely on. But anyway, what really gets me about these prompt tips and tricks and guides is that for me, what works best is communicating with it like a software developer, like it's a person. And so I kind of think that these prompt guides are like trying to distill communication in down into like top 10 tricks for communicating with someone. And I think it's kind of funny. It's like a reflection of humanity in a way, right? Because this like what really works is if you're a good communicator. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things that we all have to be good at in an AI future is communicating.
and I think even people using Chat GPT today are one of those. It's all about the questions that you ask, right? If you have a good idea what you're looking for, and you ask a good question, you're going to get a good response.
Yep.
Versus just saying, "Tell me X, Y, and Z about whatever." You're going to get
Yeah.
a bunch of stuff that might not be even relevant. You're like, "Well, that's not what I wanted," right?
Yeah. And it's funny. It's also funny how much jargon plays a role. Like, for example, if you ask it a medical question, you'll get a much better quality answer if you ask it using medical jargon like a doctor would. And now I half the time I don't understand what it's saying back to me because what is the I don't even know what all the doctor words are about like the different sides of bones and things like that. But it does a much better you will have a much better quality answer using the jargon, which is like this weird, fascinating quirk of it.
There's a whole thing too now. People using AI to help them generate the prompts that
Yeah.
they use to get better responses back, right?
Yep. Yep.
So it's a
Yep.
whole loop that you've got going now, which
It
is neat.
is.
It's really cool. I'm glad you could do it. I just find it really fascinating that you can do it.
I know to me it's super weird because it's like the dragon eating its own tail or something weird, right? And prompting the AI with its own prompts. I do think that the AI generated prompts though leave out your personality. And I think that that makes a big difference. Like, you like if you talk to it the way you talk, then it responds in that way. And you can get more personalized results, like especially if you're trying to get like feedback on your writing or something, you can get more personalized results that way, I think. Um,
I think you mentioned like looking at medical stuff too. It happens with coding as well, right? You're going to get responses back that you need to validate because
oh
I've
yeah.
tried a couple of times going, hey, I'm trying to do this. How would I do it? And it gives me a great looking answer. But none of these functions exist. Like
Yeah.
they're not in the browser. They're not part of the API. It just kind of created them out of nowhere. And
Yeah.
I think this was like the first generation Claude I tried this with that was really giving me some sketchy info to do stuff.
100%. I love this. I love when this happens because the term of art here is hallucinating, right? And which is like it's just making stuff up. But I love when this happens because it's really funny because to my experience with it is it will make a function and you're like, oh, that's a really good function. Why doesn't that exist? And because it kind of dreams up things that you want to there to be, even if it doesn't exist. And I think that it also is the newer models like Claude 4, which I've been playing a lot with this week. Um, and it's way better at not hallucinating when the API or the SDK is well covered, like it's well used on the internet. But like the more niche APIs, it still hallucinates like crazy. And that's so it's kind of interesting seeing that evolution where it is being more grounded in the things that are more popular are becoming more grounded in the models.
Yeah, and that's incredibly useful and great. I really dig that because I do use it for assistance here and there. Don't help me. I need to convert this data to this data set. What would you do? Kind of deal, right? I don't want
Oh
to keep
yeah.
writing all these loops and stuff. I use Copilot mostly. I haven't really played around with Claude too much. It's that Copilot kind of do its thing, but even then, it does things I don't want it to do. The first time ChatGPT came out, I ran it and asked it to give me like a arcane expression to run something. And it gave me an answer, and I was like, no, I don't know arcade very well. So I sent it to our arcade guy at work, Christian, and I was like, hey, is this going to work? And he was like, where did you get this from? This doesn't make any sense. Right. So, I mean, I'm sure it's much better now. I'm not sure if it knows arcade at all very well, but
Arcade is a funny one because it's so much like JavaScript, yet not. And in my experience, all of these models, they just they fall back to, oh, it's like JavaScript. And will create syntax or functions that they exist in JavaScript, but not in Arcade. And that's quite challenging to use it to generate Arcade in that scenario. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
what kind of stuff have you been working on at Dynaptic to integrate IA into workflows for folks? Anything you can talk about?
Yeah, a couple of things. There's some, so first off, some of my favorite use cases are non-chatbot ones. Um, and so one of my favorites, which has actually been around since like ChatGPT 4, like the original 4, when it actually got reasonable, right? 3.5, it was suddenly popular. 4, it was like, okay, this thing's actually really good. Um, is protecting data inputs, like scanning a form and checking to see did the user give us anything that's weird.
Okay.
And so like my favorite example is like if you've ever heard of like an adopt a drain or an adopt a highway program,
Yeah.
lots of cities and governments run those. And usually when you do that, when you do those, you let the person name the thing, like you name the drain, right? And they are so funny. I think one of my favorite ones was like drain, drain, go away. But you kind of imagine like you're reading that and you're like, oh, they were definitely singing that when they typed that in, right? I can't sing. I'm not going to try. But people get really creative, but they also just put in it's the internet. Sometimes people put in really bad things. And you don't want your employees to have to read those to like find out whether they're clean or not, right? And So passing those through an AI to check them for you. And when you do that, you do need to give the person submitting it a way to be like, no, come on, the AI is saying that's wrong, that's bad, but it's not. And so because sometimes it doesn't understand. So you need to give them an escape hatch, but it really can reduce the amount of work that you have to do and the amount of time that a human needs to spend reading that. And so I really like that kind of use case because I think that's super valuable. And you can an extension of that is like in Survey 123, being able to use like an AI model on an image, right? And extract data out of the image. Same kind of thing, like being able to run that on the data immediately as they're filling in the form or collecting that data to you. Um, One of my favorite kind of more GIS-y ones is data matching. And so say you have a you're getting a list of locations and some attributes about those locations, and you need to match them up with an existing data set. Okay. But say they're national parks, and you're going to get things like Crater Lake National Park, which is in Oregon, and you might get something like Crater Lake National Park, CLNP. You're going to get all of these different things. And there's like kind of these traditional ways that we used to do this in computer science with regular expressions and all of these different, kind of guessing sound X algorithms to match based on pronunciation and all these different things. But now you can just drop those into an AI and it matches it at human level, basically. And so you have this random upload coming in, and you don't know if the data is standardized or not, but you can clean it up and standardize it immediately. And you can even have the AI give you a probability of matching, right? So you can flag the ones that have a low probability and go back and use them and go back and fix them or look at them. And so those are my favorite kinds of use cases where you're like, it's out of the box, right? It's not just putting a chatbot in everything, which like I have a little bit of chatbot fatigue personally because it's like, right, everybody's
True.
putting a chatbot in everything. And so I really like these kind of out of the box different use cases for models like this. Um, yeah,
That's
those
really
are probably
cool.
my two favorites right now.
That was neat because I mean, like standardizing the data before it goes in is huge because once it's in, it's such a pain to try and clean up down the road.
It's so hard, right? It's so hard. And we've all been dealing with this for so long.
Yeah,
You remember, I know you've probably been around long enough to remember like when we would have coded value domains where you'd have the most ridiculous things. You'd have ATT, AT ampersand T, AT and telephone. Like you have just and telegraph or whatever it's called. You have all of these different variations. It's all the same thing. And cleaning it up was very manual. I remember
exactly.
sitting there writing SQL statements after SQL statements, and it's like, nope, these are all the same. Flag all these. These are all the same. Flag all these. Trying to clean that stuff up. And now you can have the AI do it for you.
And I'm sure there's people working on that on database side, right? Just to clean up old data and asset management systems and stuff, and get everything nice and pretty to
Oh
get
yeah,
used everywhere.
yeah, yeah. I think there's a lot of ways that AI can I think in the future especially be fit into those workflows so that it doesn't have to be a fully AI tool. It might be an AI, a human augmented tool where you're pulling up the data and the AI is flagging things for you and you're cleaning it up as like the things it can't do, but you're kind of doing it live in an interactive way, like with the AI.
Exactly. That's very cool. It's like the whole the vibe coding that's going around right now, right? Like
God.
I mean, I get it. It's interesting. I get you could probably get pretty far with it, but once you hit like a roadblock somewhere, I just don't. I don't know how you get out of it, right? I mean,
So like vibe coding drives me totally bananas. And for a couple of reasons. One, it is incredibly powerful, right? And I call the one version of this disposable apps, right? So it's the idea that I can code one off in less than a minute this application that solves my specific problem. And one of my favorite examples, have you ever played the New York Times Connections game?
No, haven't.
Okay. It's a word association game. It's super fun. We play it at dinner like almost every night. And I have a friend who was like, I really wish that you could move these boxes around because it's basically a 4x4 grid of words. And you're looking for four groups of four words that are related in some way. And he wanted to be able to move the boxes around to organize them, right? Instead of having like as you're thinking through this, try to organize the words. Instead of the way the game is played, you have to pick four and submit it and see if you're right. And you only get like four tries or something like that, right? So you want to be sure you're right. And so he wanted to organize these. So he takes a screenshot of this, drops it into Claude, and writes a couple of sentences like, I want a version of this game where I can drag and drop these boxes and move them around. 30 seconds later, he had this disposable app that is a right there running in the Claude interface. You don't have to deploy it, right? It's very simple, but he could drag and drop the boxes and organize them and think through the game in a different way.
Okay.
And like that's really useful. And so those kinds of use cases, I think those are the best like vibe coding, and I still don't like that word, but they're the best like examples, like disposable apps, things you're just going to throw away,
Yeah.
right? You don't want to maintain that code. You just want to save the prompt and do it again the next time, right? Um, but the reason that I really don't like vibe coding as a term is that as a software developer who's been a consultant for my entire career, this is what I've done basically since the beginning. People give me the vibe of the problem they have, and then I dive into the data and I try to figure out what's actually going on here and how can we build a solution. And so and then I build a scope of work and then I pass it to my development team and they go build it. So it's like there's these different levels of it, but we've been doing this the whole time. It's just now we're swapping in an AI in some of the steps instead of a person.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
And it just kind of, I don't know, it drives me nuts to try to sensationalize this with another term. And when we're really just we're doing the same thing we've been doing. We're just automating some steps and or augmenting some steps. And so yeah, vibe coding, it drives me bananas, but it's fundamentally we've been doing it for a long time.
Even down to like UI stuff. So Vercel's got like V0, right? So you just drop it in there, tell, oh, I need the UI for this and that. Copy over your stuff and have a, ask Claude or whatever else, tell, hey, I got this component here. I need to wire it up with these other ones. And I don't know, man. It just,
I, it's really fascinating because it's so powerful and so limited at the same time.
yeah.
And that's, I think, the weird part of it is so like I had this Python web application that I wanted to be able to run on my iPhone. And I was like, okay, I don't know how to do Swift. It has been years and years since I've done that. I don't want to learn this right now. Okay, so I used a tool called CodeBuff, and I was like, rewrite this in Swift as an iOS app. I mean, it basically did it on its first try. The part that it suffered with and it struggled with, and I struggled with as well, is it required a Bluetooth connection to a device. And that
Okay.
and there was no library for it. So it's like, reverse engineering this Bluetooth protocol, which is tough. And it couldn't really do that. Like it could give me stubs of code, but I had to figure out how to what the communication protocol was. Um, but it was able to scaffold the whole thing out and kind of build the bits and pieces that I needed to finish it. And it wasn't a big app. It's still I'd call it small, not micro, a small app. But it did it, kind of in one shot. And I think like it can't do that if it was, 100,000 lines of code. It wouldn't succeed, right?
For sure. For sure.
But but it can do these like starting tasks. Um, and and yeah, you do still kind of hold its hand and walk it through these different steps. Um, but I was working on a project today where I was sitting there and I would give it a command and I would let it go work. And then I would go back to reading my document or reviewing whatever it is that I'm doing, like, and not pay attention to it writing code and just let it sit there and work for a few minutes, 5 or 10 minutes, and then come back to it and check on what it's doing. And like, yeah, I have to hold its hand a little bit, but it's letting me build things that I wouldn't otherwise have time to build.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I mean,
Uh,
they're great tools when you use them right.
yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I've had to do a bunch of stuff with the TypeScript compiler and
Mm.
walk a bunch of ASTs and everything, and that's real pain if you've ever had to do that by hand. It's real pain to kind of do that. So I just kind of used every now and then to say, I'm looking for this, just figure it out, spit something back, and it works. It works just great. It does exactly what I need. So, as long as they're being used as tools, I think they're
Yes.
fantastic, right?
Yes. And that's I think that's the key point is it's a tool in the toolbox that you're using to help you write code. It's not replacing you, it's a tool that you're leveraging.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. There
Yeah.
was that whole thing with what was it? I think it was called Devon. That was supposed to like be replace programmers, right? It turned out to be like
Yep.
a complete like falsehood. It was completely
Yep.
bogus.
It yeah, it's really hard. This part of it is really hard because these things have gotten so much smarter over the last couple of years. Like we're on like this exponential liftoff of AI power. But even the experts in this stuff, the people that are making them, can't agree on whether or not they are going to be smarter than us in their current form, or we have yet to discover that form, or if we're 6 months from like AGI, or if we're 100 years from it. Like nobody knows. That's the weirdest part to me is you've got these, brilliant scientists working on this and they all disagree.
Yeah.
And so like I don't know what does that mean? I think that's one of the weirdest questions in this space is like what's going to happen in the next 6 months, 2 years, 5 years? I don't know.
Yeah, because this stuff is still in its infancy. Like you said, we just started using it like a chatbot style a couple years
Yeah.
ago, 2, 3 years ago, right? So,
Yeah.
and we're already at like the stage we're at. We have agents you can write. You can, what was it MCP? I know I haven't
MCP.
tried
Yeah. Yep.
MCP to like run agents over agents stuff, and even that people say is not going to last for long because you have something else coming up right after it, right? So,
Yeah. And I don't know how well those agents really work. Like there aren't very many of them that are super widespread.
yeah.
OpenAI has like Operator, which is supposed to be able to like literally operate a computer on your behalf. But it doesn't work that great yet. Like it's not, you know, Claude or Anthropic has one too that I experimented with. And ironically, I was trying to get it to play the connections game in New York Times. And you wouldn't believe where it got stuck. It got stuck not being able to scroll down on the page past the ad.
Wow. Okay.
Like, like it just couldn't figure out that it needed to scroll.
Man, that is something.
And and like even telling it like no, just scroll down on the page, it would be like, "Oh, I need to scroll down on the page and then not do it." It's like they fail in the weirdest ways. And that's I think that, they succeed at writing 1,000 lines of Swift code in 5 minutes, and then it can't figure out how to scroll a web page. Like,
That's a
how
trip.
does that happen?
And I think even Google search is down, right? Because most people are just asking chatbots now.
Yep. Yep. That's I do that a lot. I'll use like just the other day. So in Portland, I live in Portland, Oregon, and in Portland in the spring, Portland is a giant ant hill. There are just ants everywhere. And in this house, we definitely have a bigger ant problem than I've ever had before. And so I was looking for professionals. So I can't do it myself. I want somebody to come help me do this. And So I put it in OpenAI's deep research. I described my problem and the types of ants that I had. I took some pictures and did some research on my own to figure out like what kind of ants are they and what I've tried already. I outlined all of that in deep research and sent it off for 10 minutes. And it came back with these are the two best companies that fit your vibe and fit your problem.
Wow. Okay.
So I called them both and I liked one of them. So they'll be here next week to try to do this. And like, but it's like, I don't know, that's a weird, I felt so weird doing that. Like, like normally I would have done that. I would have spent that 10 minutes on Google, right?
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
exactly, but I didn't. I spent 10 minutes doing something else and let OpenAI do it. I felt super weird doing it. It
That's a
just
great
felt
use
really
though.
weird.
That is fantastic. I'm gonna try that next time.
Yeah, it worked really well. I don't know how long that stands, but or for what use cases that works for, but it just did work for that.
Oh. So in terms of GIS, where do you think AI might help us go down the road here?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different things that I think are happening here. One is we've had for a long time these geo AI models, right? And I mean, long before data science was popular, we were doing data science in GIS, right? And and now that's kind of evolved into geo AI, and we have all of these like pre-trained models and different tools you can use. But what's really fascinating to me is we're starting to see just barely the big large language models be able to fill in for a specifically trained data model or data processing models. And so my example is the imagery extraction, right? Or imagery labeling. So like I need to label, I need to know what percentage of this house has been burned and not having to train a new model, but being able to use a large language model instead to do this one-off task. So that's one thing I think we're starting to see the beginning of, and I think we're going to see more of that because these large language models are very human-like in their capabilities. We see that not only in things like GIS, but we see it in robotics, where Google has been able to take like a large language model and have it control robotic arms. Same core training, different output. Super weird. So that's one thing. The other thing that I think we're going to see a lot more of is I think we're going to see a lot more assistant type interfaces, both for end users asking questions, like, can I build this on my property? Does it violate a permit? Like that kind, or do I need a permit? Does it violate some kind of zoning? Um, then we're going to see those kinds of things start to pop up. We see the fringes of that starting with little communities and people that are sitting on the bleeding edge of technology are trying to build those themselves. And I think we're going to start to see more of those things appear. And then I think we're going to start to see more, for lack of a better term, chatbots in GIS tools, right? And it's going to be things like helping us build workflows so that you don't have to like you don't have to drag all of the toolbox tools into model builder. It's going to chain it together for you because a lot of that is fairly straightforward once you know what process you're going to do. Um, I think we're going to see things like building the first draft of map symbology, right? And then letting you work on it. And enabling more people to get a kind of a head start with those kinds of things without being an expert in it, having something that is a good grounding before going off and making it your own. Um, yeah, those are kind of the short-term things that I think we're going to see a lot of. Um,
Yeah, the assistant stuff I think will be really cool. 'Cause I always imagine stuff because I used to work for county out here in LA. And one of the things that we had to do quite often every year is like population projections, right? And you bring in all these different data sets. You have the assessor data for all the parcels. You've got land use data. You have general plan data for all the different cities. We get all this data sets together, and then we spend about a week or so just kind of trying to do these projections for like the next 5 years to match them up against last year's projections and stuff. If that kind of workflow, if I could just put the data in and tell it what I want it to do and let it do it, and
Yep.
it can do the comparisons for me, that'll be key right there. I think that'll be an awesome little trick to do.
And you can see, so we're starting to see just the beginnings of those. Not necessarily in GIS yet, but just kind of generally.
Uh,
So like for example, Zapier, which is an automation platform, they have agents now, and I put that in air quotes because it's like you get to describe what process you want to do, and then it uses, because Zapier is a big automation platform, so it has hooks into probably hundreds of APIs. And you can authenticate to those, and it brings all these tools together, and then it tries to hook all of these tools into the AI agent to try to do the task you've described. And so it doesn't work very well yet in my experience. I was messing with it this week. It definitely falls over a lot. I ended up just building the workflow myself, but we're starting to see the very beginnings of that, like kind of that fit for purpose agent where it has this set of tools, this set of data, and it can execute this process for you based on what you've described or the standards you've put forward. Um, I think that's going to be really powerful. I think it's going to be really powerful.
awesome. Yeah, I look forward to it. I think there's gonna be a lot of really cool stuff coming up. Outside of vibe coding, I think there's a lot of really cool things happening down the road.
Yeah, I don't know. I may be wrong. Maybe vibe coding will take over. I don't know.
All right, Christopher. Well, I want to be respectful of your time. You're a busy guy. You're running a company over here. But before I let you go, you got any tips, tricks for listeners out there? Anything at all?
Um, I think my biggest tip for AI is just use it. Like get used to conversing with it, and it doesn't take much use before you kind of build an intuition for, oh, it's stuck. I need to just start a new chat now. Or, oh, if I list out the things that I really want it to do, then it does a better job of doing it instead of asking it to make up that list. And I think, you know, treat it like a human, tell it who it is, and be specific about what you want. I think is the big that's the big thing.
Awesome. Awesome, Christopher. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. And I'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to the Bounding Blocks today. Please subscribe for more content.